Let's jump in a time machine and head back to 2012. In the digital world, that feels like ancient history. But it was a really pivotal moment. A research paper from that year asked a question that sounded kind of crazy at the time. Could a massive, top-secret organization like NATO actually survive and maybe even thrive in the wild west of social media?
To really get the vibe, let's start with one of the most famous wrong predictions ever. It's just a perfect reminder that when a huge technological shift is happening, the people at the top, well, they often completely underestimate it. They just can't see how the world is about to be turned upside down.
So fast forward to 2012, and the world was right in the middle of another one of those massive shifts, the absolute explosion of social media. And for these big, slow, traditional institutions, the question was, almost existential. Could you really boil down complex security policy into a 140-character tweet? And maybe more importantly, should you even try?
What we're really talking about here is this fundamental collision of worlds. On one side, you've got the old guard, the hierarchical, buttoned-up world of governments and military alliances. And on the other, you have this wild, chaotic, totally user-driven new frontier of what everyone was calling Web 2.0. And the difference between them was just fundamental. Web 1.0 was basically a lecture. Information flowed in one direction, from the institution down to the public. Think of a press release. But Web 2.0, that was a conversation. It was messy, it was bottom-up, it was instantaneous, it was like a global town square where suddenly everyone had a megaphone. Yeah, and here's the crucial part to understand. Web 2.0 wasn't about just sitting back and consuming stuff. No, it was about active creation. Users were uploading, they were sharing, they were commenting. They weren't just an audience anymore, they were participants. And that, right there, changed the entire game.
So, okay, what did this new world actually look like back in 2012? What were the tools that were shaping this whole new reality? Well, the scale was already just staggering.
First up, you had the undisputed giant, Facebook. By 2011, it had 750 million active users. It wasn't just a platform, it was practically its own digital nation-state. Even institutions like the CIA and the US Marines were setting up shop there, trying to figure out how to connect. And then there was YouTube, pulling in a mind-boggling 3 billion views a day. And this really shows you how global this shift was. 70% of all that traffic came from outside the United States. It was the world's default video platform, and it was pretty much uncensored.
And finally, we have Twitter. Now, the user base was smaller, sure, but its influence was absolutely enormous. It was, without a doubt, the fastest information disseminator on the planet. News, rumors, even revolutions. They were breaking not in stuffy press rooms, but in these 140-character bursts. And for organizations built on slow, careful communication, this was a massive, massive challenge.
So in this chaotic new world, why on earth would a secretive security alliance even bother to jump in? What was the strategic value? Well, the paper argued it wasn't about marketing. It was actually about survival.
See, the argument was that by engaging on these platforms, you could fundamentally change how the public saw you. It was a way to kind of open the doors, show people what you were doing, and, be held accountable for it. And the end goal? To build public support and trust for the long haul.
And the practical benefits were just huge. For an organization like NATO, the tech was already there, which made it cheap to do. It gave them a direct line to younger people who definitely weren't reading official government reports. It let them shape their own story online through things like SEO. And crucially, it gave them a brand new, instant channel for managing a crisis.
But ultimately, when you boil it all down, it came to this one really powerful idea from the paper. The goal was to transform from this faceless bureaucracy into an institution that had, well, human face.
Now, this wasn't just some academic theory. At the very moment this paper was being written, these platforms were being tested in the most high-stakes situations you can possibly imagine. This was, truly, social media's trial by fire.
The most powerful example, of course, was the Arab Spring. All of a sudden, revolutions weren't just being reported on by traditional news channels. They were being organized, documented, and broadcast to the entire world by everyday citizens using tools like Facebook, Twitter, and especially YouTube.
Just stop and think for a second about how profound this change was. In March of 2012, Syria's deputy oil minister didn't call a press conference to defect from the regime. No, he posted a video to YouTube. A huge political act, something that used to happen in smoky backrooms, was now broadcast to the whole world instantly. And then things got even weirder. This new digital town square wasn't just for activists, it was also for combatants. Suddenly, you had a formal military alliance and an insurgent group arguing directly with each other on Twitter.
I mean, just look at this exchange from 2011. NATO's official account asks this question, and a Taliban spokesman tweets right back with an accusation. This was what the paper called the egalitarian frontier, a place where conversations that were literally impossible through normal diplomatic channels were suddenly happening out in public for everyone to see.
And it went way beyond just communication. Social media actually became a source of battlefield intelligence. NATO itself admitted that its Fusion Center was analyzing public tweets and other online chatter to help identify military targets in Libya. The line between communication and actual military operations was blurring completely.
So after looking at all this, what was the final verdict from this 2012 analysis? Well, the conclusion was stark, and it was pretty much unavoidable. The paper's verdict was crystal clear. This was not a fad. The move toward a two-way, interactive internet was a permanent cultural shift. For institutions like NATO, adapting wasn't just a good idea, it was a matter of basic survival in this new information age.
And if you need one final piece of evidence, here it is. If the Pope, the head of one of the world's oldest and most traditional institutions, could figure out how to get his message across in just 111 characters, well, the argument that complex ideas couldn't fit these new formats was officially over.
Now looking back more than a decade later, it seems pretty clear that the adaptation wasn't quite complete. While these institutions learned how to broadcast their message on all the new platforms, they never truly mastered the art of conversation. That egalitarian frontier the paper described, it's become a new kind of battlefield, one where the biggest megaphone, not necessarily the most reasoned argument, often wins. And that's the complicated legacy of that moment when the old guard finally decided to log on.